Okay. Hello again, everyone. My name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's event featuring new fiction. Today, we will be hearing from Barbara Bryan, reading from Topanga Canyon, Fire Season, which was released March 21st, 2023. DeAnn Daley Holcomb, reading from Beyond the Shadows, which was released March 20th, 2023. And Colleen Hollis, reading from Karma 2, which was released April 28th, 2023. All three authors' books can be purchased both from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, you can order any of these books from Atmosphere Press's website at atmospherepress.com/books. Please see the links I'm dropping in the chat. At the end of today's event, we will also have time for audience questions. So during the readings, if you have a question for one or more of our authors, you can go ahead and type that in the chat and I'll make sure it gets asked during that time later. But then during the actual reading itself, please stay muted to keep extraneous sound at a minimum. Of course, you can certainly feel free to use the chat for praise and comments. And one last note before we get to the actual readings today, we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a book manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Barbara, DeAnn, and Colleen today. We're going to go ahead and start off with our first reader, who is DeAnn Daley Holcomb. DeAnn is an award-winning television and print media journalist, published author, writer, editor, substitute teacher, and public speaker. Her first novel, Family Secrets, was a finalist honored by the Eric Hoffer National Book Awards and Dan Poynter's eBook Awards. DeAnn's latest book, is a mystery novel, Beyond the Shadows. DeAnn lives in Texas with her husband, Greg, and son, Spencer. If she's not working on her computer and writing, you can find her in Colorado enjoying the great beauty and outdoors. Check out her website at www.deanndaleyholcomb.com. Today, we'll be hearing from Beyond the Shadows. In this book, a killer is terrorizing women on the streets of Dallas, Texas. Television news reporter Claire McKenzie hits the airwaves, warning the public about the killer tagged the smiley face murderer. Claire becomes further entangled in the investigation when it's discovered she knows the killer personally. We'll hear more about the story now from DeAnn.
Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, here we go. He'd seen her in the club before, all soft curves and long legs, but the timing hadn't been right. The sweet adrenaline rush of what was to come had just started to flow, and he had been ready to make his move when her date showed up. He backed off, disappointed, but willing to wait for his next prize. There would be another night. Jenny Latham closed her eyes and rocked to the beat of the music. Showing off her black dress, she enjoyed the music from the Jason Aldean type country band while she stood at the bar waiting for another drink. Jenny looked outside at the swarm of people on the patio. It was a pleasant night, even though the summer heat was starting to creep in. Inside the popular nightclub Mickey's, it was getting crowded, and the bar was full of people socializing, partying, searching for someone to party with. It smelled of fresh polished leather, perfume, and lingering smoke. Instantly, she felt him behind her. He pressed forward slightly to give his drink to the bartender. Her excitement washed over her, but it had nothing to do with alcohol. Jenny turned, looked up at him, and smiled her dazzling white smile. He nodded, backed away. "Hey, Jeremy," Jenny said, smiling. "Hey, Jenny, good to see you too." She'd seen him here before. They had talked a couple of times, but nothing serious. He was over 6'2", lean, muscular, with black hair and piercing blue eyes. She noticed how big his hands were when he reached over to take his beer from the bartender. "Are you alone?" Jeremy asked. "No, my date's in the restaurant. I just wanted to check out what was happening in here and get another drink," Jenny said. "Your date won't buy you a drink?" Jenny laughed. She never understood why she did it, but she noticed the pin on the bar. She reached over and wrote down her cell number on the napkin and laid it back on the bar in front of him. He picked up the napkin and put it in the back pocket of his jeans. "Give me a call when you get a chance and we can meet for lunch or something." "That sounds right on my agenda. Call you later," Jeremy said. Jenny waved goodbye, turned and walked away, back to the table to join her date for the night. Jenny paused in the aisle as a couple was being seated. She thought of her date, Johnny Watson. He was good looking, but he didn't do anything to turn her on. No, Mr. Dark, tall, and handsome was who Jenny wanted to be with. She wondered if the thrill of what she had done added to her excitement. Jenny had never acted on a whim when it came to men. She'd always been careful. Her girlfriends would laugh at her, telling her to loosen up and have some fun. Jeremy might not even call, but it was a chance she was willing to take. Johnny went to the restroom before dinner arrived. He wasn't happy when he glanced into the bar and saw his friend Jeremy talking to Jenny. Johnny and Jeremy were always in competition when it came to a pretty woman. He sat down at the table moments later before she arrived. Jenny smiled at Johnny when she sat down. They talked about their workday before their steaks arrived. Once dinner was over and they were getting ready to leave the restaurant, walking towards the front door of the restaurant club, Jenny couldn't bring herself to look into the club as they passed by, but she could hear the music blaring loud, a Keith Urban song, Without You. The disc jockey had continued the country music theme and had the country night going strong. She figured by now the party was underway since bodies were lined up against the wall all the way out. During the drive back to Jenny's house, there wasn't much conversation. She wanted to get home fast. Johnny got out of his black Lexus and walked around to open the door. He helped Jenny out of the car, then grabbed her and gave her a kiss. It was a kiss to let her know. She tasted like the sweet liquor she'd had after the dinner drink, and it turned him on. He had to hand it to her. She kissed back just as hard. He pulled back and looked at her, knowing the invitation was coming. Johnny, dinner was wonderful, but I need to get going, Jenny told him. I have a fashion show coming up and I need to get up early. He tried to hide his disappointment, although he was kind of upset. How could he have been so stupid, he wondered. Sure, I'll see you around. Thank you again for dinner. I'll see myself in, Jenny said, as she walked towards the front door of her condo. Jenny unlocked her door and let herself in, closed the door, turned on the alarm, then turned on the front porch lights, dimming the lights in the entrance hall. She walked toward the living room and had just lit 2 candles when the doorbell rang. Jenny jumped in surprise. Had Johnny come back? Her alarms inside her were going off as she walked toward the front door. She grabbed her cell phone in case she needed to call 911. Jenny peeked out the peephole in her front door. She took a step back in surprise. What the heck? What's Jeremy doing here? Her nerves didn't calm. She was puzzled. How did he find me? She wondered. Jenny slowly unlocked and opened the front door. Hey, girl, Jeremy said with a big smile on his face. How'd you find me? Jenny asked. Oh, I had my ways, Jeremy said as he started laughing. Finally, Jenny reacted. Oh, well, come on in, Jeremy. She held the door open wider. Jeremy walked in. She closed the door and locked it. 6 months later, chaos breaks out. It was 5 a.m. when the phone rang. Lance Harris, chief homicide detective and chief of the Dallas Homicide Division, coughed and groaned, nearly knocking the lamp off the nightstand as he reached to pick up his cell phone. He'd been asleep for less than 3 hours and feeling the effects of the previous night. Oh, goodness, he muttered as he grabbed his cell phone. Hello? Yeah? Okay, I'll be right there, Harris told the dispatcher. His day was not off to a good start as he climbed out of bed, reached for his blue jeans on the chair. His cell phone rang again. Caller ID identified Matthew Shaw, a Dallas patrol officer. Shaw, what's up? Just got to the scene, Chief, Shaw said. We've got another one. Harris groaned. Don't tell me this one's got a smiley face sticker too. Afraid so. Dadgummit, make sure and keep the media back from the scene. I'm on my way, Lance said, punching the end call button as fast as the last word was uttered. Another female body with the smiley face sticker on her neck. On his way to the crime scene, Lance wondered if the pounding in his head would ever go away. He knew it was stupid to go out on the town like he did last night, playing poker and having a party, but he needed a break from this latest murder investigation, only to have another victim turn up hours later. The 911 call came in a few minutes before 5 a.m. after an early morning jogger found the body of a young woman in the park. On her neck, the killer left a smiley face sticker, like the murder last week. It had a black background and bright face on it. 2 murders in 2 weeks, shaking his head, Lance knew the media would be in a frenzy. Lance was the first detective to arrive. The patrolman under Shaw's direction set up a perimeter around the crime scene. Has the medical examiner been notified? Lance asked Shaw as he walked up. He'll be here in 15 minutes. Send Detective Sanchez to me as soon as he arrives. Lance walked down the sidewalk to the wooded area where the woman's body was. Rockport Lake and Park was a popular place for runners and bikers, despite the bushes and large mesquite trees that shadowed the sidewalk where joggers ran daily. Lance noted that the killer did not try very hard to hide the body. Was the killer in the hurry? He knew that could be important, a statement made by the killer. Lance stepped in close to her and looked down at the victim, feeling the wave of anger wash over him every time he came across a murdered woman. He could tell she was young and had been beautiful, which made it even worse. There didn't seem to be any signs of a struggle. Had she freely gone with him? Had the killer murdered her somewhere else and then dumped the body here? Lance closed his eyes for a few moments, trying to concentrate on a few clues that he had and to try and get a feel for what happened. Lance knelt down closer to examine the body. He considered the horror of what this young woman went through before she died. Medical examiner Spencer Wyatt would have to confirm what he suspected. The victim was naked except for the torn blouse, an important piece of evidence that was to be kept from the media. And there was that smiley face sticker. Lance thought the murderer raped the young woman before she was killed. The way her body laid on the ground, if his suspicions were right, they were in trouble. It meant there could be a serial killer out there. He walked around the body trying to find any evidence the killer left behind, looking for footprints in the dirt, cigarettes, torn paper, clothing, anything. He heard Reed's voice behind him talking. Harris looked up, waving him over. Detective Reed Sanchez, second in command under Lance, stopped when he reached Lance's side. He looked down at the young woman. Reed's expression was one of hatred for whoever had done this. Lance knew if anyone could help him find the murderer, it would be Reed. He was egotistical, hard-hitting, and cavalier with a no-nonsense attitude. Reed was what the women would describe as virile, strong, and brave. Lance thought Reed was one of the best homicide detectives he'd ever worked with. They'd become close friends over the years and had become known as the team within the police department. This is tough, Reed said. Find out if we have any missing persons reports on any of the women in the area, Lance said to Reed. As soon as we identify her, we need to reconstruct the last 48 hours of her life. On it. Not looking good, is it? I think it's time to issue an official alert. I'll talk to the chief when I get back. Chief's not going to like that. You know how concerned he is about scaring the public. Reed knew Lance didn't care much for the Dallas police chief, Ben Lewis. To Lance, it felt like Lewis was more interested in the Dallas social scene than running a police department. Lance suspected Lewis knew how he felt about him. The two men had issues between them, and it concerned the chief's wife. If it turned out to be a serial killer, Lewis would come down hard on him and not having made an arrest. Reed turned and headed for his car as Lance called out to him, "Ask me if I care." Turning his attention back to the park, Lance watched the crime scene investigators who'd arrived to do their job. They were meticulously going over the ground area surrounding the woman, searching for any evidence the killer left behind, taking photographs of anything suspicious that might be evidence. Spencer arrived and Lance watched him examining the body, waiting for several minutes to hear his initial reaction. "Hey, Harris, I need to show you something," Spencer, the Emmy said. "It looks like a small puncture wound on the inside of her thigh. It could be a break for us." Lance didn't comment, waiting for Wright to continue. The Emmy was not only a good friend, but Lance respected him and his opinion as the Dallas County medical examiner. "I think it's the same person. I suspect the victim was raped like the others because of the bruising. I'll know more when I get her body back to the morgue. We'll run toxicology tests to see what was in her body, alcohol, drugs, or if he drugged her. Depending on how long she's been here, it will determine if we can find out if she was given the date rape drug. We need to identify her ASAP. I have Reed looking into any missing persons reports to see if anyone has contacted the police in the last 24 hours. Well, she hasn't been dead long, I can tell you that. Maybe a couple of hours. I'll know more when I get her back. I'll be in my office. Call me when you have a preliminary report." Details of the investigation swirled in Lance's mind as he headed to his truck parked behind the crime scene tape to get gloves to look for evidence. The media started to show up. Word was out. He wondered how this tragedy could happen with the increased police manpower on the streets, stepped up patrols of the parks, along with the relentless media attention. That wasn't what disturbed him the most. These brutal killings were too familiar to a past murder investigation, a past he wanted to forget. Lance made sure he would check on Johnny Watson, the man sitting on death row at the Huntsville prison, convicted 6 months ago of committing some of the worst crimes in Texas history. Lance was one of the detectives responsible for Watson being behind bars in the Texas State Prison. Watson killed 7 women before the police stopped him. Guilty memories and the faces of the murdered young women snaked into Lance's mind, sometimes without his control. Lance would always feel guilty for not being able to arrest Watson before his brutal attacks increased. Watson had become a suspect when a young lady came into the police department accusing Watson of raping her the night before. She said she'd gone to dinner with Watson, and when they returned to her house, Watson wouldn't take no for an answer. Then there had been the witnesses that placed Watson with Jenny Latham the night before she was found murdered. Lance constantly saw the faces of the young women in his mind. At the trial, the prosecution hung photographs of the murder victims on a pegboard so the jury could look at them every day. The grief suffered by the victims' families was devastating as they sat, looked, and listened to the testimony day after day. Pushing the images away, Lance wondered the similarities in the murders then and what was happening now. The past and present, too close, too eerie, too much alike. Watson's signature had been a smiley face sticker, always left on her neck. The victim had been naked except for what appeared to be a torn blouse, evidence that never came out at the trial. Lance had been able to keep that under wraps all this time, until now. This time, the media found out about the smiley face sticker and had gone wild, tagging the latest killer the smiley face killer, exactly what Lance was afraid would happen. The reporters still didn't know the victim had been found naked. If Lance ever discovered the idiot detective that had let the information slip to the media, there would be hell to pay. Could Watson be talking to someone on the outside? The Watson murders were nearly identical to what was happening now. Lance wouldn't put it past a sick person. He figured he could make a 3-hour trek to the Huntsville prison tomorrow, depending on what his investigators were able to come up with today. Back at the scene, protective gloves on, Lance and the other detectives went to work searching and photographing anything that might be unusual, any evidence that could lead them to the murderer. 3 hours later, as Lance walked back to his truck, leaving Spencer and the crime tech investigators at the scene, several of the news reporters yelled his name, hoping for an interview. The vultures had arrived. He waved his arm, jumped in his truck, and sped off. Let the police communications department handle the media. 4 hours after getting the call, Lance was on his way to his office at the downtown Dallas police headquarters. Lance would have to wait for what evidence they had gathered at the scene to come in. Chemicals, metals, drugs, biological evidence gathered, shoe impressions, any DNA results, hopefully from the puncture wound Spencer had found inside her leg, and hopefully fingerprints. A crime scene investigator had been diligently taking photographs of the scene, all of the evidence being gathered. 20 minutes later, as Lance walked inside the police department building, a blast of frigid air from the office air conditioner hit him in contrast with the humid spring weather outside. Lance waved at the police desk commander, Kurt Rosen, as he continued down the hallway to his office. Even though it was around 9 a.m, there was already a media fury with sketchy details being broadcast all over the Dallas-Fort Worth radio and television stations. All the negative attention and another unsolved murder meant a low-key atmosphere inside police headquarters. Lance stopped in at the break room to grab a cup of coffee, hoping to clear his head from the lack of sleep and from the effects of last night. Standing at 6'2" and muscular from working out at the gym, Lance was dangerously handsome with brown hair and green eyes. His smile could disarm you, and when he was angry, his expression could stop you in his tracks. Close friends described Lance as cool, detached, unemotional. True, but there was always an exception. Lance casually entered his office, walked to his desk, and stopped in his tracks. He couldn't put his coffee cup down. There she was, asleep on the couch in his office. This was dangerous. Claire McKenzie looked breathtakingly beautiful with her brown hair flowing off the couch pillow. Her jacket barely covered her body, but it did not matter, Lance remembered. He looked at her face, thinking about her sweet smile, brown eyes, and round lips. It had been 6 months since they were together. As though she could feel his penetrating eyes on her, Claire abruptly sat up on the couch, trying to cover up. Lance stood still, watching as she tried to cover herself with her jacket, saying nothing. Claire felt his anger, and as she looked into those beautiful green eyes that were shooting daggers at her, maybe this wasn't such a good idea, she thought. Claire stood up from the couch. Claire was petite with a tiny hourglass figure and long brown hair flowing down her back, compared to the tall, athletic warrior Lance. Briefly, it flashed through her mind how they perfectly fit together, thinking about the last time he'd held her in his arms. Earlier that morning, television news reporter Claire McKenzie begged her assignments editor to transfer her from reporting on the emergency airplane landing story at the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport to report on this latest murder. Claire, her news photographer Chandler, and the line truck engineer heard the police alert broadcast on the scanners while they were preparing to do a live shot for the Channel 2 early morning newscast. She felt faint when she heard Lance's voice calling for Reed to report to the murder scene. Claire's chest ached with emotion.
DeAnn, I'm sorry, I hate to cut in. I just want to make sure we have enough time to get to the other readers, but
I'm sorry.
Did I? Oh,
I thought I had timed it. Okay.
You are totally fine. I feel like the action was moving so quickly that it just like raced right on by, but it was very, I mean, it feels like a movie listening to you read this book. And of course, everyone in the audience, you can definitely find more from the book itself, from that link in the chat. But thank you so much, DeAnn.
Thank you.
Our next reader for today is Colleen Hollis. Colleen has always had a heart for children, which only strengthened through her time as a pediatric hospice nurse. While starting a donation-based program for her local school system offering hygiene items for free, she found a love for giving back to the children living in poverty, similar to her younger self. Whether coaching cheerleading or collecting donations for different causes, Colleen has found many ways to give back. However, it wasn't until her 30s she decided to shake things up and start writing and illustrating her books in the hopes of helping so many more children in the future. Now a Reiki master, Colleen enjoys assisting others in healing their mind, body, and spirit. Her first novel, Karma One, was published by Atmosphere Press in 2022. For more, visit colleensnovelsinc.com. Today, we'll actually be hearing from the sequel to Karma One, Karma Two. AJ is given the chance to right past wrongs and find the happiness that has eluded him in previous lifetimes. With the help of spiritual guides, AJ tries to break free from the cycle of greed and power that has haunted his family. Will he be able to overcome his past and create a brighter future? This is a bit of a turn in genre from DeAnn's book, but equally exciting. And now we'll hear more from Colleen. It's all you.
Thank you so much. Can you see me?
Yes, you're looking very crisp.
Oh, thank you. I could only see the other author. So yeah, thank you so much. AJ and Isabella are turning 19. They are about to graduate high school, one of them being the top of their class and the other being second highest. They are preparing to get married and head off to college soon. Their lives are in full swing, and Isabella decides if she is going to attempt to find AJ's mother, it is now is as good a time as any. She wants AJ to have his family by his side through all these major life events. She doesn't want him to be able to look back with regret as he thinks over these most monumental moments of their young adult lives. She collects the spare money they have been saving for their wedding and sets up a meeting with a private investigator. She gives him the details of what she knows of AJ's mother and brother, which are even quite limited even for a PI. But feeling for her, he agrees to do the best that he can. It is only a couple weeks later when the private investigator, Santo Capanelli, the one she had hired, calls with some rather exciting and encouraging information. He believes he has found AJ's mother and brother. Ember Elizabeth Rogers has been checked into a rehab facility, ma'am, due to a drug charge that she has accepted a plea deal for. Since she is a repeat offender and her son are using the system like a revolving door. The judge stated at sentencing he is hoping sobriety will improve her life and improve her son's life as well, hoping to not see them again in this capacity. The judge sentenced her to a mandatory rehabilitation period of 3 months while she detoxes and gets some time with sobriety under her belt. I can give you the information, ma'am, and you can go and visit and see if it is indeed her. She thanks Santo before collecting the remaining information. Not wanting to get AJ's hopes up, she keeps the news a surprise until she can verify that it is indeed his mother. As Isabella is guided to Ember Elizabeth's room, she once again is nervous. What is she going to be like? Is this going to be her? What will she look like? Isabella prepares herself for the worst, but hopes his mother is not too far gone so that he is able to get some closure. She loves AJ so much that she doesn't care how scared she gets. She won't stop until she reunites her love with his family. Walking with confidence the rest of the way to her room. Lying in bed is a Caucasian woman. Her hair is short and starting to gray. Isabella is glad that she doesn't appear deformed or scary. Ember, you have a visitor, the counselor Rebecca says as she attempts to arouse her. Ember Elizabeth opens her eyes and gathers her thoughts. Oh, hey, Miss Rebecca, what are we doing today? I brought you a new friend. This is Isabella, Ember. Having been in rehab for over a week now, the acute stages have come and gone of the withdrawal. Although drowsy from the maintenance doses, she is otherwise in her right state of mind. Is it okay if I leave you two to get acquainted? Yes, of course, Ember Elizabeth and Isabella both reply. Okay, well, I'm not that far away if anyone needs me. Thank you, Miss Rebecca, Isabella says as she smiles before she watches her exit the room, closing the door behind her. Having no clue who Isabella is, Ember Elizabeth wonders what she is and what she could want with her. Just a junkie in rehab. It's not like she has anything to offer anyone. How can I help you? Are you my new counselor? Did she say Isabella? Yes, that's right, ma'am. My name is Isabella Franklin. Is your last name Rogers, ma'am? Yes, it is. Do I know you? No, ma'am. You don't know me, but I think I know someone who's been looking for you for a very long time. If you're one of Lacey's girls, you can go tell her I don't work for her anymore, and she'll have to drag me kicking and screaming back to that dungeon. If she thinks I'm going willingly, she's off her rocker. I don't know any Lacey, ma'am. No, I don't suppose you'd look this healthy or have this good of manners if you were one of her girls. How many children do you have, ma'am? Isabella asks. Can you please stop calling me ma'am? I am far from proper. For God's sakes, I'm a prostitute sitting in rehab. Formalities are hardly needed. I have 2 sons, Isabella. What does it matter? What are their names, Ember Elizabeth, if you don't mind telling me? Of course not. They are Liam and Arizona, but we always called Arizona by his nickname AJ. Like I said before, what does it matter? Well, like I said before, I am Isabella Franklin, and I am about to marry your son, AJ. In disbelief that this beautiful, clean-looking little rich lady sitting in front of her is going to be her daughter-in-law, she takes a second to understand what she said. Wait, you know my AJ? She perks up at the thought of being reunited with her son, whom she hasn't seen since she was forced to sign over her rights to him. Only seeing him for a few minutes before he was sent to live with the couple who owned a farm all those years ago. She is grateful. To her, it seems he has had a better life than she even imagined he had, or would have. Yes, we are all set to be married in 4 months. 4 months? Whoa, what's the rush? You kids are barely 18. Isabella interrupts. AJ is almost 19, ma'am, and I mean this with no disrespect, but you have no idea what he and I have been through. She goes on to tell her about AJ and how he came to live with them as a prostitute at 14 and about the baby that they had at 16. They talked for an hour as she updated her with their race to be the first in their class and all the great qualities AJ has, as well as all the ways she's fallen for him. Ember Elizabeth sits there in awe as she listens so closely to every word. She can tell this young lady truly loves her AJ. They discuss her other son, Liam, and where he is living and working with a local pimp. Isabella agrees to find Liam and assist him as well. Liam, AJ's little brother, is now a 16-year-old still living on the streets just like AJ had for several years before he found the Franklins. Having been in and out of the juvenile detention centers for charges such as theft and robbery, Liam found it to be somewhat of a reprieve from his life on the hard streets when he would be sentenced to a couple months of juvie. Not that it was a cakewalk in there either, having been assaulted twice now and the last time leaving him in the infirmary for a week. Liam is so grateful his prayers are answered when Isabella and her father, Gregory, managed to track him down. Explaining the situation, Liam doesn't hesitate for a moment to take the deal AJ also took when he was offered a way off the street all those years ago. They get him in a similar program to his mother, and attempt to get him help as well. AJ's mother is about to finish up her mandatory 90-day sentence in rehab as she prepares to see her long-lost son after all these years. The plan is for Liam and Ember Elizabeth to be in the audience as AJ and Isabella graduate. They are to be transported back to the Franklins' residence to await the arrival of AJ. AJ expects nothing more than a graduation party they have set up in the garage for the two of them. Isabella hopes he is blown away when he arrives at his mother and brother being the only 2 guests. Well, at first, that is. His foster father, Gregory, has set up some time to give him, the 3 of them, some time to catch up before the real party starts later in the evening. The Franklins have had the hardest time keeping this secret. They couldn't be more excited when the time finally arrives. The 2 have been staying at a family friend's while they await the graduation. It has been the longest time of Ember Elizabeth's life, knowing after 13 years she will finally hold her baby again. AJ is in heaven after he receives his much-deserved diploma.
Thinking of all those years in captivity, wishing for nothing more than to go to school, he sheds a tear at how far he's come. Once the ceremony is complete, AJ, none the wiser, pulls into the driveway at home. He gets out and heads up to the garage. Isabella, walking beside him, attempts to act normal, feeling like she may pass out from holding her breath as they make their way up to the garage. Expecting a crowd, he is confused as he rounds the corner and only sees two people, a taller boy and a shorter woman sitting at one of the tables with their back towards him. He doesn't recognize them in the slightest at first glance, but as he stands there for a moment, pondering what's going on, AJ doesn't even need to see their faces. He senses in the center of his chest and gets a sensation that rises up that he just knows it is his mother and brother. He falls to his knees and hits the floor weeping. AJ is unable to control his emotions or get up from the floor. He is overcome with such joy that he can't do anything but kneel down and rejoice in God. The pair turn to see him, and they see their AJ for the first time since he was 4 years old. As he looks up at the image of their smiling faces, it is forever imprinted into his mind. Unsure how this could be happening, he can't believe that he is looking into the face of his mother and brother once more. They look so healthy that AJ is left speechless. He just takes it all in as he hugs them for the first time in so long. There is no dry eye in the house, while Isabella and the rest of the Franklins stand there watching as this beautiful reunion takes place. AJ, now 82, sits in the front row as he awaits the Nobel Peace Prize for his work with Amy's Angels, as well as his veteran housing program that he eventually extends to all the homeless across the country. He sits there with Amy's locket in his hand, with his now much older fingers running along the inscription, "Reach for the stars, Amy, love Mom." Now almost rubbed completely off after all these years. He doesn't need to read it. He's long since had it memorized. He thinks to himself, "We made it, Amy girl. We did it." It's then that he hears her voice say peacefully, "Yes, we did, AJ." AJ is moved to tears as he sits there listening to his loved ones, political figures, and past children that he's assisted out of trafficking speak one after another. They say such kind words about his character and his life work that he is unable to contain himself several times. Every one of them is so precious to AJ in some way, but none more than the featured guest, his wife, Isabella. He knows she has been working on her speech for weeks, and he can't wait to hear what she has come up with. She gets slightly nervous before talking to an audience, always has, as AJ watches his beautiful wife bite her lip from nervousness as she once did in her youth. He appreciates all the wonderful years she stuck by his side. He honors the life they have had and the friendship they've shared. As he hears her name introduced, he is assisted to a standing position by his son Samuel, so he can give her a hug and a kiss, showing his love and affection for her. "I love you, Izzy. Good luck, my darling. Thank you for being the real MVP, babe," he whispers in her ear. She touches his now wrinkled cheek as she kisses his lips ever so sweetly, just like she has for decades now. "I love you more, Mr. Jackson." She winks at him as she turns to grab the young escort's arm and be guided to the stage. AJ feels excited and nervous for her to give her speech. He loves to watch her conquer her fear every time. She is the strongest, most brave person he's ever known. He doesn't know what he would have done without her by his side all these years, in awe of the person he has been gifted by God and blessed to call his wife, and the mother of his children. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my AJ, my Ari, Arizona Sunshine Jackson. What can I say? He even has sunshine in his name." The crowd chuckles at her joke. Glad it landed, she smiles and continues her speech. "Arizona, you have been such a blessing and friend to so many men, women, and children along the way. Our journey together started when we were just children ourselves. I fell in love with the broken version of the boy that would eventually become this amazing man who sits before you and I." She looks around at the smiling crowd. "I have had the honor of seeing him heal not only himself, but countless others along this journey from tragedy to triumph, including many of you sitting here even," she says as she looks over the many guests, many of them who've went through one or another of their programs over the years. "What you have endured and overcome is nothing short of a miracle, my love. He's overcome obstacles time and time again, not knowing how to give up on a cause that is dear to him. He always pushes through, making it a reality. It truly is a miracle we are here today, able to honor you and the blessing that you have been to each of us. I have spent my whole life loving this one man." She blows AJ a kiss that causes the entire crowd to awe in their enduring love. I know most of you know this, but when we met as kids, AJ was like many of the children we've helped throughout the years. Abused and neglected, he was left wandering around for a place to belong. Having endured the same fate as some of the children we've invested in have, he has made it his mission to help as many children caught or as many people caught in the same terrible cycle as he was. You have spent your life caring for the homeless, the forgotten, the addicted, and the abused. Every day you have attempted to affect at least one person in a positive way, and for that we say thank you. Not just for guiding our family with honor and compassion, but for all that you do daily to make sure the lives of those around you run as smoothly as possible. As she looks around once more, she locks eyes with familiar faces in the crowd that comfort her before she makes her way to looking at AJ once more. You really are the wealthiest man in the world, which in turn makes me the luckiest woman since I get to say I love you every day. I love you, my darling. Let's go celebrate how awesome you are. Cheers. As she raises her glass to cheers with everyone, the crowd lets out a loud cheer as they raise their glasses in salute. Isabella makes her way back to the seat. How did I do, my darling? She says, slightly flustered, but very relieved. You did so well. You kept it short and very sweet, my love, he says before he kisses her cheek sweetly.
Thank you so much, Colleen. I feel like there are just so many dimensions to your portrayal of a lot of themes, but especially here, we saw themes like addiction, that sort of thing. So I think that reading just gave such a great sense of the depth that you can find in both Karma 1 and Karma 2. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Our final reader for today is going to be Barbara Bryan. Oops, one second here. Okay, yes. So our final reader is going to be Barbara Bryan. Barbara is reading from Topanga Canyon Fire Season. Barbara's love and respect for horses only intensified when she encountered the horrid practice of soaring on Tennessee walking horses. During the COVID lockdown, Barbara decided to use the time she had by writing a book that would shine a light on soaring through the adventures of Matt and Ariel in Topanga Canyon. Barbara is part owner of the Interactive Cafe in Santa Monica, California. You can learn more by visiting interactive-cafe.com. Learn more about Barbara's writing at bbryanwrites.com. Today, like I said, we'll be hearing from Topanga Canyon Fire Season, in which Matt, a teenage boy from Chicago, is exiled to his grandfather's horse ranch in Topanga, California, by his alcoholic mother. There, he must learn to adapt to an alien lifestyle filled with strangers and animals he finds terrifying, horses. And we'll hear more from the story with Barbara. Welcome. Barbara, you might just have to unmute at the bottom of the Zoom screen.
Can you hear me now?
We heard you for a second, but then I think the mute went back on. So, Barbara, if you're able to see at the bottom of the screen, there should be an unmute button, bottom left corner.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's perfect.
Oh, that's great. Let's hope that this holds because I'm having obviously technical difficulties. My little computer decided today to. Oh, well, anyway, this is just life and here we go. Okay, so I wasn't too sure what I should read from the book. So I'm just going to start at the beginning. I'm going to start chapter 1. This is The Reluctant Traveler. Should I begin? Matt, legs braced against the back of the adjacent passenger seat, sat hunched over, staring at his inert cell phone, longing for the word mom to light up the screen. His mother had loaded him onto the Greyhound bus in Chicago early Sunday morning. Her goodbye hug held only hot anger, which she wrapped around him until its searing heat penetrated his bones. It was now Tuesday, and still no call. The bus was an hour into its route down Interstate 15 from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. He speed dialed her again, and once more, it went to voicemail. A fleeting shadow darted over the unchanging screen. The sudden movement drew the boy's glazed stare to the window. A thick layer of condensation covered the glass due to the bus's cooling system constantly spewing ice-cold gusts of air from its vent and colliding with the heat of the Mojave Desert. Matt twisted in his seat and wiped his jacketed forearm across the large window. A gold fleck hawk appeared and flew alongside the greyhound. The hawk broke the monotony of the landscape's dull palette, painted in varying shades of sand, much too open, too flat, too barren for the boy. Matt pulled his jacket closer around him for warmth, ignoring the now damp sleeve, and envied the unfettered hawk. The boy had long ago finished the few sandwiches his mother had packed in his suitcase. What little money she had given him, he'd wasted on video games and overpriced snacks during the layover in Las Vegas. His stomach rumbled as he searched his pockets for a forgotten candy bar. Finding none, he returned to watching the lone hawk lazily riding a wind current, higher and higher, perhaps hunting for a fat mouse or a slow rabbit. To Matt, either one sounded like a welcome meal. Matt glanced up and saw the bus driver watching him in the rearview mirror. The driver, who might have played football when he was younger, but had feasted on too many chili fries since then, gave a little wave of his hand when their eyes met. Matt figured the driver was trying to make up for the hard time he had given him while changing buses in Las Vegas. The driver, stationed on the bottom stair of the Greyhound, had towered over him in stark contradiction to his welcoming smile. A deep Texas drawl had accompanied the greetings. "Good afternoon, my name is Thackeray Davis." He had then pointed his plump finger toward the nameplate pinned on the pocket of his tightly fitting uniform. "I've driven this route for over a decade, and I'd like to know who is traveling with me." Matt felt the driver's eyes stray to the nasty bruise on his forehead that radiated an ugly shade of yellowish green. He remembered fiddling with his hair, trying to cover the discoloration. "May I see your ticket, son?" Matt had replied with a nod, handing him the ticket. After studying it, Thackeray proclaimed, "Ticket's good." The driver had then looked over his shoulder and asked, "Where are your folks?" "My mom's home in Chicago." "You look mighty young to be traveling alone." The boy bristled and straightened his spine to appear taller. "I need to see some ID, son." Under his breath, Matt muttered, "I'm almost 15. He handed over his student ID card. The driver double-checked the ticket and carefully studied his student ID. Then Thackeray asked him to spell his name as if it was someone else's card and he would forget the name on it. Resentment flared that someone would again question his age. "My name is Matthew Barrett, Barrett. I'm going to Los Angeles to help my grandfather, Silas Phillips, and I turned 15 in November." "Oh, all righty then, Matthew," answered Thackeray, taken aback by his emphatic tone. "I prefer Matt," was the icy tone. "Oh, I prefer Matt," was the icy tone. Thackeray smiled and moved out of the way. "All righty then, Matt. Take a seat. Take any seat you like. It's a light load this trip." Matt had wanted to sit in the back of the bus, but a harried mother trying to control 4 bickering children occupied that section. Other travelers, scattered throughout the bus, made taking a seat closer to the nosy driver his only option, so he had settled down there. Matt responded to Thackeray's wave with a slight wave of his hand and then returned to watching the hawk until it disappeared in the distance. Resting his head against the window, he stared through the glass, mesmerized by the undulating waves of heat rising from the desert floor. The constant motion of the bus soon lured Matt into a pleasant drowsiness, and the hum of the 6 spinning tires soon pulled him into a troubled sleep. The last thing he saw were 3 riders dressed in black, chasing a herd of wild horses, eyes white with terror, vanishing into the desert's shimmering distance. Matt awoke to storm clouds gathering on the skyline and immediately checked his phone. No missed calls from his mom, but the phone's battery was running dangerously low. He felt the bus increase its speed, Thackeray trying to outrun the rain. Regardless, the storm clouds soon caught up with them, erasing the last of the day. Matt stared into nothing but darkness. Thackeray called out, "Hey, hey, Matthew, come move up front next to me." "It's Matt," answered the sullen voice. The boy stared out his window, lost in the night. My mistake, Matt. Sit up front next to me. When we top the next ridge, you'll be able to see your new stomping grounds." "I need to charge my phone." He held up his phone so that Thackeray could see it in his rear view mirror. So I can call my mom." Surely, he thought by now, his mom would realize this whole visit to his grandfather's ranch was a big mistake. Can't charge your phone on the bus." Thackeray, seeing the disappointment on Matt's face, added, "They're changing stations at the bus terminal. You can do it there." Matt slouched back into the seat, gripping his phone. Hurry up, Matt, you're going to miss it. Move up here next to me." Matt shoved the phone into his pocket and he grudgingly moved next to Thackeray. He slumped down into the seat, propping his feet against the front seat divider. You'll never be able to see anything like that," said Thackeray. "And if you don't take your feet off that partition, I'll stop the bus and drop you off here right in the middle of nowhere." Matt mumbled, "Yes, sir." He lowered his feet and sat up straight. The bus's large windshield gave him a 180-degree look at the road ahead. But beyond the bus's headlights and the oncoming traffic, Matt saw nothing. I don't see anything." "Don't be so impatient." Thackeray shifted the bus into low gear and began the slow climb up the narrow pass through the San Gabriel Mountains. Matt started to turn away from the dark window as the bus reached the top of the crest. The flowing river of light stretching across the Los Angeles basin stopped him. Matt stared at the vista. He thought of Lake Michigan in the wintertime, ice crystals sparkling under a full moon. He shivered. "Well, Matt, what do you all think of Los Angeles, the city of angels?" Matt could not quite grasp the size of it. He thought Chicago was big, but Los Angeles went on forever. He stared at the traffic. It flowed like the liquid mercury in Mr. Rocker's science class, cascading down the pass in its shiny liquid form, fast-moving, unstoppable, poisonous quicksilver. Matt suddenly felt lost. With a sense of relief, he said, "Not going to stay here. My grandfather's ranch is in some place called Topanga." A ranch with horses?" An enthusiastic "yeah" was the boy's response. "Can't get much better than a ranch with horses." "I guess." Matt leaned back in his seat. The bus started its descent as lightning danced across the sky, as if jealous of the splendor below. Rain began to fall and the bus slowed as it wove its way through the slick city streets. "We're almost at the station, Matt," said Thackeray. "Better get your things together." Matt headed back to his seat to gather up his gear. He glanced out the window as the bus drove by a large industrial warehouse. Its exterior wall was covered by an enormous mural painted in varying shades of blue of a Native American tribal chief. The fierce warrior's face covered the entire wall, and as the wind and rain drummed on the artwork, the eagle feathers on his headdress appeared to move. The warrior seemed to be looking right at him. Matt shook himself free of the chief's fierce stare and concentrated on the approaching Greyhound bus station. It seemed much smaller than the one in Chicago. Without the dozen or so palm trees planted around an oversized Greyhound bus sign, he would never have known he was in Los Angeles. Thackeray pulled the bus into one of the unloading bays and turned off the engine. The remaining passengers hurriedly got to their feet and, holding their carry-ons, jammed the aisle trying to exit the bus. An elderly woman lost her balance, bumping into him as she passed by and said, "Oh, excuse me, young man." But Matt's attention was elsewhere. Still in his seat, he stared out the window, searching the crowded platform in hopes of seeing his grandfather. Matt wondered if he would even recognize him, or the white pickup truck with the ranch's logo his mom said he would be driving. Thackeray unloaded the luggage from the bus's storage compartments. When the last of his passengers were on their way, he leaned back into the bus and said, "Okay, Matt, LA, downtown terminal. This is where you get off." I don't see my grandfather." "No need to worry. We've arrived a little ahead of schedule." Matt, hesitating, stood in the aisle. Thackeray added, I'm sure your grandfather will be here soon." When the boy didn't move, Thackeray said, "Sorry, son, time to go. Now don't forget your belongings. Walk straight ahead. The passenger pickup is on the other side of the terminal." Thackeray pointed toward a brightly lighted area with passenger terminal painted over the door. Best to wait inside the terminal until the rain lets up. You'll be able to see your grandfather through the windows when he arrives. He'll know that's where you'll be waiting." Matt paused at the top of the stairs, hoping Thackeray couldn't hear his pounding heart. "Now, if you don't get off my bus, young fella, I'll be late. And what will my wife say?" Thackeray added with a laugh. Matt reluctantly stepped off the bus. Clutching his suitcase, he headed for the terminal. The platform, jammed with people rushing to get out of the rain, carried him along with them. He caught sight of Thackeray in the now empty bus, disappearing into the city streets. Matt released a heavy sigh as he trekked through the crowded terminal. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I felt so many emotions that Matt was feeling. Just the way you described them made it almost
That's sweet.
uncomfortably
Thank you.
vivid.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so definitely everyone check out that link to Topanga Canyon fire season. But at this point, we do have some time for our audience Q&A. So anyone in the audience, if you have a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type it in the chat and I'll make sure it gets asked. I have already received a couple through the chat. So we'll start for a question that came in for all three of you, which was, what was the inspirations behind your stories? Maybe DeAnn, do you want to kick us off on this one? Oh, DeAnn, it looks like you might still be muted.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. As a former television news reporter, I covered 2 capital murder trials, and it was unbelievable. And I interviewed both. They were both convicted of capital murder, and I interviewed both of them after the trials were over as they were being transported out of the courtroom. And you just kind of remove yourself from who you are when you're asking the questions. Why'd you do it? And they both said they were innocent. And then you kind of come back to who you are after it's over with. And I'll just never forget that feeling of, evil that I felt. And so that kind of was able to give me some background and inspiration as to be able to write this mystery fiction. So.
Yeah, definitely. It's a whole new meaning to writing what you know, right?
I'll tell you, it was really something. Yeah.
I bet. Yeah. Colleen, also for you, what was the inspiration behind your novels?
Well, aside from it honestly just came to me one day, kind of like a flash of inspiration. It is exactly that. You write what you know about. I grew up in poverty with abuse. And so I wanted to give some justice and pay some homage to, unfortunately, a life that a lot of children live in. And it's unfortunate, but it is definitely something that I had also to encounter. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's something that you personally, I can personally write about. So.
Yeah, it helps inform a lot of choices too in the writing itself, so totally makes sense. And Barbara, for you as well, what was the inspiration behind your book?
Well, as you said earlier, I had started writing this book during COVID, and I wanted to do a story because I was really shaken up by that pandemic and losing friends and relatives. And I wanted to write a story about that people would read and understand that no matter what is thrown in front of you, you can overcome it, and that life will be better, and that you just have to sort of twist today's unpleasantness and point. I mean, it sounds like the sun will come out tomorrow, but that's basically what I wanted to do. And while I was doing research, because I wanted to write about something that I know, which is horses, I came across Tennessee walking horses and this horrible practice of soaring. So I put that in the book to sort of have two things going, for Matt being able to overcome his shyness and be able to have a project that he could really do to make things better. And that was it. I just wanted to do a book that we all understand that, yes, we have the possibility, and within ourselves, we can change where our lives are and where we want our lives to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this whole other dimension that comes in when you're writing about this this practice, in this case, that's really affecting a lot of people and animals still. So really interesting to see how that plays out through the novel's storyline too. We have a question now that is for Colleen. Between your two novels, Karma 1 and Karma 2, if you can you tell us what is your favorite part? I know that's a lot to choose from, but.
No, that's okay. The reason I chose to read what I read today is because I love the way that he loves his wife in the second book. Obviously, these souls from the first book come into the second book, so he gets this opportunity to make right something that he really got wrong in the first book. So the fact that he's able to really respect this soul this time around, and the way she really betters his life in this book, she would have done in the first book. Her opportunity was cut short by his own decisions. And so the opportunity to love her better in this second book is just an amazing part of it. But that's why I actually chose what to read, because it just pays such homage to their love in the second book, which they could have had in the first book as well if he'd have been a different character. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I think it speaks volumes about that scene itself too, just knowing that it you feel so strongly about it, out of all of the scenes. But we have a question that is for Barbara from Melissa. Are any of your characters based on any people you know personally?
That's an interesting question, and the answer is basically no. Obviously, when you're writing characters, you're going to incorporate bits and pieces of people that you've known. But with the characters in the book, particularly Matthew, I just sort of found that I was writing up characters that I would want to spend time with.
That is relatable. So I love that answer. Another question from Melissa. This is for DeAnn. Is it difficult to revisit these topics having covered them for your job in real life, or was this process cathartic for you?
Kind of both. I have CD copies of my interviews that I did with them that aired, the stories that I did, and going back and watching those now, I still just shudder, just because of what it was like. But then, good wins. The good beats the evil, and that's how you have to look at life, is that the goodness in life will win out. So that was kind of in my story too.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes the most cathartic things are a bit difficult to visit or revisit. So totally understandable where that sentiment's coming from. We'll jump back to another question from Melissa. This one's for Colleen. Did you have both books written before you published the first of your two books, or did Karma 2 come after Karma 1 was already published?
So I launched my first one in August, and it took me about a year to do Karma 1. When I was actually doing it, though, when I was going through the process, the people at Atmosphere Press, the lady who got my book was like, when's the second one due? Like, when is it going to be done? I have to have the second one. She didn't even know it was going to be initially a second 2-part thing. So I honestly did the second one in 2.5 months. So that one completed in September. And so I launched the first one in August, but obviously I had it well done before then. So I had started it, it took me 2.5 months to do part 2, which was incredible because it took me a year to do it the first time. So, and then I just did the launch for that in August or in April. So from September to April kind of turnaround time for editing and publishing and all that stuff. But yeah, nope. I loved having the opportunity to know that the souls were, because I had an outline of they were going to come back as these people, but I really got to then organically create it and then notice like I did this in this first book. I want to button it up this way. And I got to really pay attention to that when I was finishing up part 2, which is good because then you don't really have any characters you don't feel satisfied knowing. And there's a lot of characters. That was one thing they said is there's just a vast cast of characters and they are all buttoned up well. So like, exactly what happens to them. So.
Yeah, and it's almost like that momentum from publishing the first book really accelerated that process for the second book, it sounds like.
The cover was already created together because I already knew I was going to be doing 2 that fit together. So I mean, that part was done, however many weeks before it had already been accomplished because Ronaldo actually digitized my copies very quickly at the same time for the first one. So yeah, things were even, going to the same publisher was helpful also because things were shortened that way too. So you're doing books at once is not a bad way to go is, look at that.
Yeah. And just in case anyone hadn't noticed yet, if you look at Colleen's screen, you'll see both of those covers right next to each other and they do flow just beautifully together. So glad to hear that worked out so well. We have a question. This is for Barbara. Where did it go? I just had it. Oh, yes, here it is. Do you have any personal experience working with horses or on stables, or was that something that you had to research for the book?
As a younger person, I spent a lot of time riding. So, and I continued well into middle age riding and at school and just for pleasure. And because I love horses, I would find ways of hanging out around stables for various reasons. So yes, they were definitely in my life. But with the book, as with anything, the things that I remembered or facts, if I would either check with friends that I know, and then I couldn't find answers, I would do research because you don't want to put something in a book that's not right. So a little bit of everything. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah, a little bit of everything is just the perfect way to put it, I think. So that's great. And then we have one more question. This came in for DeAnn. Is your first book, I think it was Family Secrets, was your first book also a mystery, or is Beyond the Shadows your first time ever writing anything in the mystery genre?
Well, when I found out I had cancer about 12 years ago, I had started Beyond the Shadows first, but then I put it aside when I was going through the treatment and wrote Family Secrets, which is a women's fiction. And I was relating more to women's fiction at that point. But actually, it's a miracle that I did that, because writing it later, all the technology and all the things that have changed in the last 10, 12 years, it wouldn't have been right. And now it's right with the cell and the technology and computers. And I mean, it's all different. But yeah, my first one was a women's fiction, and my mystery fiction. Yeah.
All right, we have a multi-talented writer on our hands, folks, various genres, and definitely pulling them off. So that's great to hear.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So at this point, that about wraps up our Q&A session. I just want to say thank you so much to Barbara, DeAnn, and Colleen for being here with us today. It's always wonderful to hear books come alive and the voices of their writers. And I think that was especially true today. So thank you so much for being generous with your words and your thoughts and your time today. And thank you, of course, to everyone in the audience, as always, for being with us here to celebrate these wonderful authors. And of course, don't forget that you can order Topanga Canyon, Fire Season, Beyond the Shadows, and Karma 2 from the links in the chat. And please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, to sign up for our email newsletter, or to submit a book manuscript of your own. You can feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and let us know that you attended today's event. But other than that, we'll look forward to hearing from you. And that's it. Have a beautiful, wonderful rest of your Sunday, everyone.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was really great fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.